Today we're going to talk about burns and corrosions. We are still in chapters 19 and 20, and this is part 1. ICD-10 makes a distinction between burns and corrosions. Burn codes are those things caused by heat, like a fire, a hot appliance, electricity, radiation, and corrosions or burns due to chemicals. But your guidelines are the same, whether you're coding burns or corrosions. A current burn is a burn in the current episode of care, and they are classified by depth, extent of the body involvement, and the agent. In other words, what caused the fire. Depth is talking about first degree, second degree, third degree. Remembering that the eye and the internal organs, you can only classify a burn by sight. You're not going to see anything to do with degree when you're dealing with internal organs. Your X codes, or your external cause codes, are in Chapter 20, and many of the burn codes have an instructional note below the code, just as the injury codes did, telling you to use an additional external cause code to identify the source of the burn. The first guideline talks about the reason for the encounter, the treatment of external, multiple burns. You're going to sequence first the code that reflects the burn of the highest degree. So you're going to read your documentation and pick out those terms which tell you the highest degree burn. In this case, with the diagnostic statement you've been given, the highest degree burn is the third degree burn of the left lower extremity. So that is going to be your principal or your first listed diagnosis. The only difference in principal and first listed is where the encounter is taking place. If you're in a hospital, it's called a principal diagnosis. If you're in a physician's office or any other ambulatory setting, it is called first listed. They mean the same thing. So we code the child's burn of the left lower extremities, the third degree, goes first as the first listed or principal diagnosis. Because the next two codes are both second degree, there's no particular order. You could choose whichever one you wanted to choose to code in the second, third, and fourth positions. Note that on the burns of the hands, there is no character assignment for a bilateral code. So you're going to have to code both the left hand second degree burn and the right hand second degree burn. Then we're going to code their external causes, which in this case is a house fire. And all of these have the seventh character A for initial encounter. The next guideline has to talk about is talking about those cases where the patient has a burn but also has other things going on. And what I'm talking about in this particular scenario is domestic abuse or a confirmed case of adult abuse. There is a separate podcast that talks about child and adult abuse, but just for now, know that that is always going to be your principal diagnosis when you're confirming abuse. And in this case, the physician stated in the statement, she is a victim, confirming that this is a victim of domestic abuse. Then we look at the burn codes and code those second degree burns followed by the internal burn. The external cause code is assault in this case because of the reference back to the domestic abuse, and that is going to be the X97 code. So even though the focus of treatment is on the burns, this is one of those circumstances of admission that it talks about in your guideline. If it's an abuse case, that T74 for the adult abuse is going to be the principal. The next guideline, the patients admitted for burn injuries and other related injuries, such as smoke inhalation or respiratory failure, the circumstances of admission govern the selection of the principal or first listed. The physician has stated that the patient is admitted in acute respiratory failure, so that's going to be your principal. The smoke inhalation I put next because I think the two are related. Then you're going to code the burn of the head and the chest wall and the shoulder, all third degree. So it doesn't matter what order they're in, they're all third degree. And then the burn of the larynx and the trachea would be included. The last code is external cause for the explosion of the propane tank. Whenever we have a burn of the same local site, meaning burns that would fall under the same 3-character category code, but within that 3-character category, there are different degrees of burn. Some are third, some are second, maybe some are first. you're only going to record the highest degree. So in the case that we've been given here with the car accident, the patient has a burn of the right thigh and the right knee. Both of those fall under the T24 category, but we're only going to code the higher degree. So we're only going to code the right thigh third-degree burn. There are 3 external cause codes here: the car accident, the fire, and the place of occurrence. The next guideline talks about non-healing burns. Whenever the diagnostic statement says a non-healing burn, you're going to code that as though it were an acute burn, because the necrotic tissue is considered a non-healed burn. I've introduced you to a term here called eschar. Eschar is the black, dead skin, basically necrotic areas over burn, that has to be removed in order to apply an artificial skin graft. So we're going to code the burn of the hip as your principal diagnosis, because that's the non-healing burn. And you notice I've given you the pathway here on the right. You have to kind of jump around until you finally get to the right code to code it as a burn of the thigh, because that's how the alphabetical index directs us. Then you have 3 external cause codes. The X code is your agent of the burn, and that is the hot object, in this case, the heating pad. Then we have the 3 external cause codes. Everything getting a 7th character of A that requires a 7th character, because this is the initial encounter. It's an initial encounter because you have ongoing treatment of a burn. It hasn't healed. You're not in a routine healing phase. It's active treatment. And the next guideline has to do with an infection. When you have an infected burn, you're going to always want to include the code for that infection. So now you think about our definition of a principal or first listed diagnosis is what occasioned the patient to come for treatment, either admitted to the hospital or coming to the doctor's office. In this case, the child is coming to the doctor's office, and you see that this physician has stated that the burn on the left hand is healing. That would be a routine healing, is going to get a 7th character of D. But the burn on the right hand, the child's right index finger, has cellulitis and is infected. The child had been in the office last week, and they cultured the wound, and it grew Pseudomonas. So we have the organism causing the infection. So what brings the child to the physician's office is that cellulitis on the finger. So that's going to be your first listed diagnosis. There's an instructional note that tells the coder to identify the infectious agent. In previous visit, the physician had cultured the wound and knew that Pseudomonas is the infectious agent, so we code that. Then we're going to code the burns with different 7th characters. The right-hand burn is going to have a 7th character of A, because we're still working on those fingers, and the left-hand burn, a 7th character of D for routine healing. And the last code is the external cause code. If you have any questions, let me know, and be looking for Chapter 19, Burns and Corrosions, Part 2. Have a good day.